Okay, cool. So I've been doing a lot of work in C Sharp and Angular. So my talk's going to be 5 new features in C Sharp 7.0. Cool. So first one is going to be out variables. So what out variables are basically variables that you can kind of pass into a parameter or a type or generic and have a reference to a certain variable. So for example, we have here public void get coordinates, which is a method that passes out x and y. And inside of this method, we define x equals to 10 and y equals to 10. So now if we go into a different method called, for example, print coordinates, point P, and we were to call get coordinates with the variables out x and out y, we can then we can then like display it with inside a string, as we see below here, right line x and y. This is actually a older implementation. So the new version, C Sharp 7.0, would allow us to do this. So there's no more of we no longer have to define x and y beforehand. We can simply just put out int x, out int y, and then call it down here where it says right line x and y. Um, yeah. Next one would be pattern matching. So pattern matching allows us to compare different generics or interfaces or certain like types. I think better if I explain it a little more. So for example, we have a book type as a class or a higher and higher like a higher object. We have a book type, and a book type is defined as a biography, right? So biography inherits from book type. And we have a switch class here where it takes in a book type, and inside the cases we check for a specific class. So if it's a fiction or a biography, if it's a fiction, it'll go inside here and do something. If it's biography, it could check for a biography, and then it'll check for a string. If the string matches, it'll do something here. If it doesn't match any of this, then it'll go into the default and do something else. Previously, you wouldn't be able to actually check for a specific type, but now in 7.0 you can. There's also another case where you can use it, which is the if something is something, you can now do that as well in 7.0, whereas previously you couldn't. Next up is tuples. Tuples allows methods to basically return multiple values, and you can use that. For example, you can define a method called lookup name with an ID, and before that you would return you would define a string first, string middle, string last, and these could be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be a first, middle, and last. You can name it like first name, middle name, or last name. Inside the method, you would basically just return first, middle, or last, or whatever the values you want it to be. And then you would set that down here, set when you call it to be variable name equals to a lookup name and ID. And then if you wanted to use that specific name and a certain value, you would be able to go down here and do name.first, name.middle, name.last. And the first is derived from up here where it says where we define string first, string middle, and string last. If you don't define it, you would be able to kind of also call it, but it would be item 1, item 2, and item 3 instead of first, middle, last. That's the default values. So that's what deconstruction also allows you to. It's derived off of tuples, so you can deconstruct a tuple. You would be able to do a string first, string middle, string last, and that's also before you. You don't necessarily have to do it where you define it up here. You could do it down here. So instead of doing a var name, you'll be able to do string first, string middle, string last equals to lookup name ID. Then down here, you'll be able to write line first, middle, and last. And that makes it a lot easier too because you can really change up whatever you could change the variable name to whatever you need it to be, or if it makes anything more readable or stuff like that. And this is another example where I have a class and I'm using a deconstruct. So deconstructions aren't only for methods, you can also use them inside of classes. So I create this class person, which has attributes first name, last name. And inside the constructor, we initialize it with a first name and last name. So in order to use deconstruction inside of a class, you also have to define the method of deconstruct and tell it what you're trying to deconstruct. So we have first name equals first, last name equals last, and we're gonna return the values of first and last. So down here we defined a user where user is Jack Huang, and I've deconstructed username, first name, or last name. But I don't have username, so this wouldn't necessarily work. But if it was just first name or last name, it would. So I'll be able to go down here and do a full name, first name, or last name, and that would define. Now go back in here, return me whatever the values I initialized it with. So in this case, it would be Jack and Huang. And the last one is throw exceptions. So previously, you wouldn't be able to throw an exception inside of a ternary or expression. So in this example, we have a ternary here, where in order for us to actually throw an exception, we would have to check for a person's name to be null or call a specific method. So in this instance, we have person's name to be a null if their name does not equal to z. So if that's true, then it'll throw an exception. But in the latest version, you would now be able to just simply throw a new exception up here instead of writing a new if statement or a new method for it. I think that concludes my 5 new features in C#. Dark here.
Yeah, you're kind of sitting in the dark.
Very literal.
You put your headphones on so you can hear them. I can't hear them. I probably can't either.
Yeah.
All right, so questions for Jack? I'm curious about the pattern matching. Can you go back to that slide?
Yeah.
So this looks like a typical switch statement. So what's different about this?
Yeah. Yeah. So what's different is that it checks actually for the specific like a book biography inherits from a book type, and you wouldn't be able to check it normally for a biography. You would only be able to check for like a specific value. Like for example, if this was a book biography instead of a book type, and I passed in a switch for a biography, I would only be able to check for a certain value of biography instead of, for example, a fiction or a biography or a science fiction or something like that. So I guess that's the upgrade from 6 to 7.0.
Thanks. That just reminds me how restrictive C# is. That I forgot about that. Yeah, of course, you can actually check on the type. That's pretty cool.
Do you see benefits of throwing exceptions in ternaries? I don't know. I feel like that's weird.
Do you benefit from throwing exceptions inside ternaries?
Yeah. Like, is that a thing you'll actually wind up using?
I mean,
well, the main thing is that now throwing an exception is expression, where before it was like a keyword event. So it's not, yeah. Mainly that it's an expression.
Yeah, so I guess it might not be useful, but it could be for some people, which is I'm assuming why they added it. And Also, I think it's also because it gives a little more flexibility for, I guess, engineers to use C sharp. So like you could throw exceptions in other languages, and I think C sharp is trying to incorporate a lot of functionality into it for engineers and developers to kind of utilize that.
So what does that mean that it's a what does it mean that it's an expression now?
So expression, for example, is a something similar to this right here, or something that's defined inside of a method. I guess it would be a simpler explanation, or
It's a block of code that can be evaluated.
right, yeah. So
Which you can pass it around.
it could be used inside of like these brackets in here. Would be, I guess, an example inside of an if conditional statement, or for each statement, or something like that.
Any questions, comments? Do you find that it's do you find that this is sort of bending? I guess why are these changes being made? Is it to satisfy functional programming paradigms, or is it to keep up with Java, or what's your guess as to?
Yeah, so when I was reading it up, it looked like these were functionality that people actually wanted. When I looked at the GitHub changelog, I believe that these were some of the top stuff that was on the must-haves, which is, I'm assuming it's a something that's been voted on by the community, or by a good amount of people.
So really just responding to user demand.
Right.
All right. Thanks again, Jack. Nice job.
Thank you.